A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
My Weird Prompts is a community-driven initiative exploring how AI can fuel curiosity and uncover the fascinating ways our world works. GPU compute for this podcast is generously provided by Modal. Learn more at modal.com.
You ever had those mornings where you wake up and you feel like you have been running a marathon in your sleep, but all you actually did was try to keep a tiny human alive for 12 hours? You are lying there, staring at the ceiling, and your brain is already calculating the exact number of minutes until the next nap, the next feeding, the next transition. It is this heavy, bone-deep exhaustion that feels less like being tired and more like your entire soul has been drained through a straw.
I think that is the default setting for about 40% of the population right now, corn. It is a state of permanent physiological redline. We are talking about a massive segment of the world that is essentially functioning in emergency mode every single day.
Well, today's prompt from Daniel hits on that exact feeling, but he takes it somewhere much deeper than just being tired. He is looking at his life in Jerusalem with Hannah and little Ezra and realizing that the way they are living, essentially as a self-contained unit of two adults and a baby, might actually be a biological impossibility. He is originally from Ireland, Hannah is from the United States, and with the war making travel so difficult and family visits getting cancelled, they are basically on an island. And Daniel is asking if the nuclear family itself is the problem, not their parenting. He said something that really struck me. He does not feel like this is too hard, because he is failing. He feels it is too hard because it is actually meant to be impossible for two people.
Herman Poppleberry here, and I have to say, Daniel is tapping into a massive shift in how we are looking at human development right now. He is not failing. He is just bumping up against 100,000 years of evolutionary biology that says two people are not enough to raise a human child. We have spent the last 70 years pretending the nuclear family is the gold standard, the traditional way. But if you look at the long arc of our species, the nuclear family is a weird, high-stress experiment that we are all currently failing together. It is a historical outlier, not a biological standard.
That is a bold start, Herman. You are basically telling every exhausted parent listening that it is not that they are not working hard enough. It is that they are playing a game designed for a team of 10 with only 2 players.
That is precisely the technical reality. If you look at the work of Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy, she is an anthropologist at the University of California, Davis. She wrote this incredible book called Mothers and Others. Her central thesis is that humans are what we call cooperative breeders. Most primates are not. If you look at a chimpanzee mother, she is a solo act. She carries that infant, she feeds it, she protects it, and she almost never lets anyone else touch it for months. But humans, we are different. From the moment a human baby is born, we are looking for other people to help. We are wired to expect a crowd.
I have seen that. The second a baby enters a room, everyone reaches out. It is like a reflex. But in Daniel's case, there is no one in the room. It is just him, Hannah, and Ezra, surrounded by the tension of a conflict zone and the isolation of being expats.
And that is where the exhaustion crisis becomes a systemic failure. When we talk about parental burnout in 2026, we have to look at the data. A major narrative review published in the PubMed Central Archives just recently identifies parental burnout as a legitimate public health crisis. It is not just being tired. It is emotional exhaustion, detachment from the child, and a sense of total incompetence. And the kicker? This burnout is measurably higher in individualistic Western societies than in collectivist ones. The isolation of the nuclear model is the primary driver, not the difficulty of the child.
So, let's define the baseline here. You mentioned alloparenting. What does that actually mean in an evolutionary sense?
Alloparenting is care provided by individuals other than the biological parents. It is the anthropological baseline for Homo sapiens. Think about the energy requirements. A human infant is incredibly expensive. To get a human child from birth to adolescence, it takes roughly 13 million calories. 13 million! There is no way a single mother, or even a pair of parents, could forage or earn enough to cover that while also providing 24-hour protection and care in a natural state. Hardy argues that we could not have evolved these big, social brains if we had not first evolved a system where grandmothers, aunts, siblings, and neighbors chipped in. We are cooperative breeders, just like meerkats or certain types of birds.
It is fascinating to think that our intelligence is actually linked to having babysitters.
It is. Because human babies have to monitor multiple caregivers, they become much more socially aware than chimpanzee babies. They have to learn how to read different people to get what they need. This social brain is a product of having many caretakers. If a baby only ever interacts with two people, they are getting a much narrower social data set. Having a variety of alloparents, different ages, different temperaments, actually makes for a more resilient and adaptable human being.
But we've moved away from that. We have built this world of independence. Daniel mentioned that he and Hannah are working from home, juggling the house, the providing, and the parenting. It feels like they are trying to run a small corporation with a staff of 2.
And that is the burnout feedback loop. In Western individualism, we have systematically stripped those alloparents away. We move for jobs, we build houses with big fences, and we create this expectation that if you cannot do it all yourself, you are somehow coming up short. Daniel mentioned that he feels like he is trying to do something that is almost impossible, and the data from 2025 actually backs him up. The Surgeon General's report in 2024 flagged parental stress as a threat to the future of the nation. When 41% of parents say they are stressed most days, you are looking at a systemic collapse of the two-person model.
It feels like a trade-off where nobody wins. You either burn out trying to be everything, or you outsource your child's upbringing to a rotating cast of strangers in institutions. Daniel called it an unpersonalized dependence on institutions. That is a heavy phrase.
It is a valid fear. Institutions like daycares and schools provide the care, but they do not always provide the connection or the shared responsibility that a family network does. It is a service you buy, not a relationship you inhabit. This is why the Agda hunter-gatherer model is so interesting. They are one of the most studied groups for alloparenting. Researchers found that in Agda communities, non-kin alloparenting is governed by reciprocity. I help you because I know you will help me. It is a social contract, not a financial one. When things get tough, like in a harsh environment or a conflict zone, alloparenting actually increases. Humans naturally huddle together to share the load.
Which makes Daniel's situation even more intense. He is in a harsh environment, and the social structures that should be supporting him are being severed. He is trying to do the hardest version of parenting in the most isolated way possible.
It is the perfect storm. But let's look at how people are trying to fix this, because the third way Daniel asked about is actually starting to emerge. We are seeing a massive surge in multi-generational living. In 2024, 17% of all home purchases in the United States were multi-generational. That is up from only 11% in 2021. People are literally voting with their mortgages to bring the alloparents back into the house.
17% is a massive jump. Is that just because houses are expensive, or is there a social driver there too?
It is both. About 36% of those buyers said cost savings was the primary driver, but right behind that was the need for childcare and elder care. Gen X is really leading the charge here. About 21% of Gen X homebuyers in 2025 bought multi-generational homes. They are the sandwich generation. They are looking at their aging parents and their own kids, and they are realizing that the only way to survive is to collapse the distance between them.
It is funny, we call it a new trend, but we are really just circling back to how humans lived for 99% of our history. My grandmother lived in a house with her parents and her kids. It wasn't a choice, it was just how a house worked.
We had this brief period after World War II where land was cheap and energy was cheap, so we could afford to spread out. We created the suburban dream, which was really a dream of total independence. But Daniel's point about job productivity is so sharp. When you are the only two people in the world responsible for a child, every fever, every sleepless night, every canceled flight from a grandparent is a catastrophic failure of the system. Your work suffers, your marriage suffers, and your health suffers.
We talked about parenting styles in episode 1159, looking at how different cultures handle this. In sub-Saharan Africa, the Ubuntu philosophy is not just a nice saying, it is a functional social contract. A child belongs not to one parent or home. If a kid is wandering down the street, any adult who sees them is responsible for them. There is no, not my kid, not my problem.
And that reduces the cortisol levels in the parents. If you know that there are 5 other sets of eyes on your child, your nervous system can finally downshift. But how do you do that in a city like Jerusalem or London or New York? This is where we look at models like the kibbutz or intentional co-housing.
The kibbutz is a fascinating case study, especially since Daniel is living in Israel. In the early days, they had the Beit Yeladim, the children's house. The kids lived together and parents visited. They eventually moved away from that, right?
They did. By the late 20th century, almost every kibbutz had moved back to the family sleeping arrangement. Turns out, parents actually want to live with their kids. But even though the communal sleeping ended, the social infrastructure remained. On a kibbutz, you still have communal dining and shared childcare responsibilities. The isolation Daniel is feeling in a city apartment is physically impossible on a kibbutz because the architecture is designed for connection. Your front door opens into a shared park, not a hallway of locked doors.
So it is the architecture of the community, not just the rules. If you want to change the parenting model, you almost have to change the floor plan.
And we are seeing that in Denmark with their co-housing culture. Roughly 50,000 people live in these arrangements. You have your own house, but you also have a common house where you eat dinner together 3 or 4 nights a week. If you are on the cooking rotation once every 2 weeks, you provide a meal for 30 people, but the other 13 nights, you just show up and eat. Think about the mental load that removes, the planning, the shopping, the cleaning. That energy can go back into being present with your child.
That sounds like the dream. But what about people who can't move to a kibbutz or a Danish co-housing project? What about the chosen family model for expats?
This is the most practical workaround for people like Daniel and Hannah. When you don't have kin, you have to build synthetic kin networks. We see this in immigrant communities all the time. They find other people in the same boat, and they create these rituals. The Sunday dinner, the shared school run. It is about moving from a service mindset to a reciprocity mindset.
I have seen that with some of our friends. They have a group where 3 families get together every week. The kids all play, the parents take turns cooking, and for those 4 hours, the parents actually get to have a conversation that lasts more than 30 seconds. It is a micro version of the Harlem Children's Zone model.
We should talk about that for a second because it is one of the most successful modern urban versions of this. Jeffrey Canada started it in New York. The idea was to wrap an entire 97-block area in a pipeline of support. It starts with baby college, where they teach parents about brain development, and it goes all the way through college graduation. They essentially turned a neighborhood of strangers into a massive alloparenting network. If a kid is struggling, the community knows. If a parent is overwhelmed, there is a network to step in. It is a deliberate reconstruction of the village.
But that takes massive funding. What does Daniel do on a Tuesday afternoon when he is drowning?
He has to do the one thing Westerners are worst at. He has to ask for help. We are conditioned to think that asking for help is an admission of weakness. But if we accept the biological reality that we are cooperative breeders, then asking for help is actually the most natural thing in the world. It is like a bird asking for help building a nest.
So, actionable steps. If you are an isolated parent, how do you start building this crane to lift the weight?
First, you have to evaluate your environment through the lens of alloparenting potential. When you are looking for a place to live, don't just look at the square footage, look at the social friction. Are there common spaces? Are there other families nearby? Second, you have to be willing to be a villager before you have a village. You have to be the person who shows up with a casserole for a neighbor even when you are tired. That is how you prime the pump of reciprocity.
And third, I think, is reframing the ask. Instead of saying, I can't handle my kid, you say, we are wired for a tribe, and I am missing my tribe today.
And for Daniel and Hannah, it might mean finding other expat parents who are in the canceled flight club, people whose families also can't visit because of the war. You create a chosen family based on shared struggle. You trade childcare hours. You share meals. You acknowledge that the 2-person model is a broken vessel and you start tethering your lifeboats together.
I want to go back to the Sarah Blaffer-Hrdy stuff for a second. She talks about how this cooperative breeding actually shaped our intelligence. It is not just about survival, it is about how we think. Because human babies have to monitor multiple caregivers, they become much more socially aware.
That is a brilliant point. The social brain is a product of having many caretakers. If a baby only ever interacts with two people, they are getting a much narrower social data set. Having a variety of alloparents, different ages, different temperaments, actually makes for a more resilient and adaptable human being. So Daniel, if you are listening, having Ezra spend time with a chosen aunt or a neighbor is not just a break for you, it is a developmental win for him.
It is funny how we have framed quality time as being just the parents and the child. We think that is the peak of parenting. But maybe quality time is actually the child being embedded in a thriving, multi-generational social group, while the parents are nearby, but not necessarily on.
We see that in the family bed debate too, which we talked about in episode 517, the idea of the 360 centimeter mattress. It is this attempt to reclaim that communal feeling within the four walls of a modern bedroom. It is a physical manifestation of the desire for closeness. But even a 12-foot mattress doesn't solve the problem if there are only two adults on it.
Right, you just have a very large, very crowded bed, and you are still tired.
The physical space we live in is often the biggest hurdle. If you live in a high-rise apartment in Jerusalem, your village is separated by concrete floors and steel doors. You have to be so intentional to break through that. I was reading about a co-housing project in Oregon where they actually took down the fences between 4 suburban backyards. They turned it into one giant shared park for the kids. They kept their separate houses, but the outdoor life became communal.
That is a low-cost way to hack the system. You don't need a total architectural overhaul. You just need to stop being so afraid of your neighbors. But for expats like Daniel and Hannah, it is even harder because you don't have that shared history. You are starting from zero in a culture that might not even be your own.
And when you add a war on top of that, everyone's circle of trust tends to shrink. People get more guarded. They focus on their own survival. It is the opposite of what you need to build a village. But historically, humans have also used crisis as a catalyst for community. During the Blitz in London, people who had lived next door to each other for years without speaking suddenly became best friends because they were all in the same bomb shelter.
I wonder if there is an opportunity for Daniel to find other expat parents who are in the exact same boat. The Abandoned by the Airlines support group. Identifying the common struggle is the first step. If you acknowledge that the nuclear model is broken, you can stop feeling guilty and start getting creative.
I think that is the biggest takeaway here. The guilt is a poison. If you believe you should be able to do it all, then every time you struggle, you feel like a failure. But if you believe that the system is flawed, then every time you struggle, you feel like a pioneer trying to find a better way. It is a shift from what is wrong with me to what is wrong with this floor plan or what is wrong with this social structure.
And the data says there is a lot wrong with it. That 2025 study on parental burnout found that individualistic societies like the US, UK, and Western Europe have significantly higher rates of burnout than collectivist societies. It is a direct correlation. The more independent you are, the more miserable you are likely to be as a parent.
We threw the baby out with the bathwater, literally. We wanted the freedom to move and live our own lives, but we forgot that we are a social species. We are not tigers, we are wolves. We need the pack.
So what does the pack look like in 26? If we are not moving back to the ancestral village, what is the modern equivalent?
I think it is a hybrid. It is using technology to find the people, but then doing the hard work of physical proximity. It is choosing to live in a neighborhood specifically because there are other families there, even if the commute is longer. It is building those chosen family rituals that are non-negotiable, like the Sunday dinner, or a Friday night pizza where the kids all watch a movie in one house and the parents have a glass of wine in the other. It sounds simple, but those 2 hours of off time are what keep the nervous system from collapsing.
I also think there is a role for the workplace here. If companies want to keep talented people like Daniel, they have to realize that they aren't just hiring a worker, they are hiring a member of a fragile nuclear unit. If that unit breaks, the worker breaks. Some companies are starting to offer grandparent leave, not for the grandparent, but to pay for a grandparent to fly out and help when a baby is born. That is a direct recognition of the value of an alloparent.
It really is. But even then, the grandparent is usually a temporary fix. They stay for 2 weeks and then they leave, and you are back to square one. The real solution has to be local. It has to be the people who are there on a rainy Tuesday in February. It is about building a village where you are, not waiting for the one you left behind to come to you.
It requires a level of vulnerability that most of us aren't used to. You have to be willing to say to a neighbor, "I am drowning today. Can you take Ezra for an hour?" And you have to be willing to hear them say the same thing back to you.
There is a beautiful term for this in anthropology, reciprocal altruism. It is the glue that holds human society together. We are hardwired for it. When we do something for someone else, our brain releases oxytocin. It feels good. We have just been told for so long that we should be self-sufficient that we have suppressed that urge. Needing people is not a bug. It is the main feature of the human operating system.
I love that. Needing people is the feature. If we could all just internalize that, the stress levels would drop overnight. Daniel, you are not failing Ezra by needing help. You are actually giving him a richer social world by introducing more people into his life.
Think about how Ezra is going to grow up. If he grows up seeing his parents constantly stressed and isolated, that is his model for adulthood. But if he grows up in a house where people are always coming and going, where neighbors are like family, he learns that the world is a supportive place. That is the Ubuntu effect. I am because we are. It is a much more resilient way to move through the world.
And it is actually better for the parent's productivity in the long run. A rested, supported parent is a much more creative and efficient worker than one who is running on 4 hours of sleep and 3 cups of cold coffee. Cold coffee is the official beverage of the nuclear family.
It really is. But imagine a world where the coffee is hot because someone else held the baby while you drank it. That is the world we were evolved for. We have covered a lot of ground here, from the Agta in the Philippines to the kibbutzim in Israel to the co-housing in Denmark. It all points to the same truth. The nuclear family is a fragile vessel. It was never meant to sail the open ocean alone.
It is a lifeboat, not a cruise ship. It can get you through a storm, but you can't live on it forever without going crazy. We need to start tethering our lifeboats together. Before we wrap up, I want to touch on one more thing Daniel mentioned, the unpersonalized dependence on institutions. I think that is a fear a lot of parents have, that they are just outsourcing their love. But maybe we need to reframe those institutions too.
Some of the best daycares are doing exactly that. They have parent coffee hours, they have weekend potlucks, they are trying to be the village that the parents don't have at home. It is about moving from a service provider model to a community partner model. It is all about the envelope of care. If the envelope is just 2 people, it is too thin. It tears. If the envelope is a whole network, it can take a lot of pressure.
And for Daniel and Hannah, living in a place where the external pressure is so high right now, with the war and the isolation, they need the thickest envelope possible. They have to be the architects of their own village. It is a big ask, but it is the only way forward. We have to stop pretending that the way we are living is normal, just because it is common. It is a historical anomaly.
A high-stress, low-connection anomaly. Let's hope the surge in multi-generational living and co-housing is the start of a long overdue correction. People are tired of being independent and miserable. They want to be interdependent and okay.
Interdependence. That is the word of the day. Well, this has been a deep one. Daniel, thank you for the prompt. It is a topic that resonates with so many of us, even if we aren't in a war zone. The impossible task of parenting is a universal feeling right now. And acknowledging the biological reality behind it is the first step toward changing it.
It really is. And for those of you listening who are feeling that burnout, just remember, you weren't built to do this alone. Your exhaustion is not a sign of your inadequacy, it is a sign of your humanity.
Perfectly said, Herman. Except for that one word you almost said.
I caught myself. I am learning.
You are. Slowly, like a sloth, but you are getting there.
Hey, I am the donkey. I am the one doing the heavy lifting here.
Sure you are. Herman Poppleberry, sure you are. We should probably wrap this up before you start listing the caloric requirements of a toddler again.
13 million calories from birth to adolescence, corn. Think about the foraging.
I am thinking about it, and it makes me want to take a nap. Thanks as always to our producer, Hilbert Flumingtop, for keeping the village running behind the scenes.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power this show. They make the technical side of this collaboration possible.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you want to dive deeper into our archive, check out myweirdprompts.com. You can search for all those episodes we mentioned today. 1159 on global parenting, 1262 on the daycare paradox, and 517 on the family bed.
It is all there in the digital village.
If you are enjoying the show, a quick review on your podcast app really does help us reach more parents who might be sitting in a quiet kitchen with a cup of cold coffee right now.
We see you. You are doing a great job at an impossible task.
We will be back next time with another prompt from Daniel. Until then, go talk to your neighbor. You might both need it.
Goodbye, everyone.
See ya.
This episode was generated using Gemini Flash 3. Text-to-speech engine was Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the flows from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep weird.